We're in Portsmouth Harbour in central southern England on a beautiful autumn morning, and I'm about to join Overlord, which is a classic 1930s racing yacht. But there's a lot more to Overlord than this. She has an absolutely remarkable story, which I shall presently relate as soon as we get to sea.
Tell us when it's clear. Oh, clear.
On the dock I said this was a special boat, and in a few minutes I'm going to talk about the technicalities of what she is, how she's built and so on. But first I've got to tell you about the history, because the history is, well, it's remarkable if you don't know about these vessels. She's what's called a windfall yacht. Now, at the end of World War II, when the Allied troops were moving into Germany, one of the last places they reached was Kiel, just south of Denmark, and it was a great yachting centre, Kiel. The Kaiser used to race his boats there back in World War I and before. But when the troops arrived, they discovered that there were a fleet of really lovely yachts, beautiful long-ended racing yachts. And the Royal Navy had a look at these and did a bit of research, and they discovered that they'd been built in the 1930s for the Luftwaffe. And the Luftwaffe used them for sail training, a bit of racing, and they used them for rest and recreation for their senior officers, especially the big boats like this one. There's even a photograph of Hermann Goering on one of these, and it could be this boat, but we're not sure. But it's a grand shot. Hermann Goering, the Reich Marshal himself. So, when the Royal Navy arrived, they saw these boats. They were all in commission, they were ready to go. And they thought to themselves, well, we're due a bit of war reparation here. So why don't we just liberate these boats and take them to a new life back in Britain? And the officers got on board one by one, sized them up, they put an NCO on the smaller ones, and they sailed them back to Britain. And there they were distributed among the armed forces. And they became called Windfall Boats because, well, that's what they are, isn't it? They're a windfall for the forces. They're the loveliest yachts they would ever have. Nothing's ever been as nice as these again. So after the war, when the vessel ended up back here in Britain as a reparation, what became of her? How did she make her journey from there to where we are today?
Well, she was allocated to the Royal Engineers, stayed there till 55, I think it was. Then she went on to the Royal Army Service Corps. A chap called Tony Venables, who was in the army then, sailed her quite a lot. And then he left the army, and then in 61 the army decided these boats were taking a lot of work to keep them going, so they decided to sell them. So Tony put in a bid for what he reckoned was the price of the lead.
Price of the lead keel.
That's right.
Wow.
And so he sailed off. He intended just to tidy her up a bit, keep her for a couple of years and sell her. But then all his friends said, no, come on, we've got to go on sailing. Let's form a club. So they did. Started off as the Overlord Sailing Club, and then it became the Offshore Sailing Club in 63.
1963.
That's right, and it's gone on from strength to strength.
Oh, a long way to go. Overlord was built by Abiking and Rasmussen in 1936. She's composite built, like a lot of the great racing yachts were at that time. A lot of the Fifes built in Scotland were the same. And so the construction is very strong indeed. She's timber planked, and it looks fantastic. The deck's been down 35 years. We got a chap in the crew aft there who said he was sailing on the boat 30 years ago, and the deck's the same. It's never been replaced, and it looks grand to me. Adrian, you're the skipper on here. I'm enormously impressed by how cool everything is. You know, things are working very nicely. And I'm looking around me, quite modern, and I see that we've got a what I would call a tin stick, rather than a wooden replica of what was presumably in here in 1936. And what's your take on it?
Right. Well, I'm only a recent member. I only joined the club in 2011. So the current mast predates my membership.
Yeah.
But I understand that the previous mast was still not the original. It was a cut down replacement, and that they decided to restore the full rig, and I only assume that the tin stick was the most cost effective way of re-rigging her. She needed the bigger mast. I think it's great that we got back the original sail area.
Yeah.
It's only right and proper, and the club runs on limited funds. And I think it's more important that the boat keeps sailing and as many people as possible can enjoy her. It is lovely to be on a boat where wherever you go, people are complimenting you, and as other boats sail past, people are taking photographs, and it makes you proud. Overlord is one of my favourite toys.
First time I ever saw her, it was in the dark, and I'd just sailed back from Cherbourg in my little tiny boat. It was 22 feet long. I'd had a bit of a bad time of it, but you don't want to hear about that. And we crept into the Hamble River at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I could see Overlord aground on Hamble Spit. And it sounded like great merriment coming out of the cockpit, and we could tell it was Overlord because of this beautiful low coach roof and the lovely oval ports which were lit by oil lamp from down below. And what a romantic sight she was.
Yeah. When Tony died, he was cremated and he wanted his ashes scattered at sea. But they ended up scattering it on the mud bank because they thought it was a bit more appropriate.
Well. And so, has the form of the club changed much since then?
I don't know that it has really. I mean, it's been quite well organised. You know, we have a Commodore and a Vice Commodore and a Treasurer and a Secretary and Sailing Secretary and that sort of thing.
And how does the money work? Because we all know that this is a big boat, and running a yacht of this standard to the decent standard that you keep her to. I mean, she looks like a club boat, but she looks really up together and seaman-like.
Yeah, we're very proud of her.
It costs a lot of money.
It does. I mean,
Where do you get the money from? How does it work?
There's a sub every year.
Yeah.
And then people
How much
pay,
is that, can I ask?
Yes, it's 80 quid a year.
Is it?
Yeah.
Right.
Which, I mean, if you think, sailing on a boat like this, it's cheap.
It's for nothing.
Very cheap.
It's for nothing.
Yeah.
You can spend that on a night out easily.
That's right. And there's a fees per day when you're sailing. But if you do a bit of work in the winter on refit, you get an allowance against your sailing fees.
I see. Well, that's lovely, isn't it?
I mean, most of us would do the refit without the allowance, but it is quite nice to have as well.
Yeah. How do you find new members?
It's mostly introduced by other members. Occasionally somebody will just turn up and say, I've seen you about, can I come and have a look? And then they want to sail. But mostly it's through friends.
It's nice to see a sort of cross-section of people, and a cross-section of ages and sexes, really.
Absolutely.
It's great. I mean, we've got old stagers like me hanging around, and we got young Tom there who's just chucked the spinnaker up and with his trendy modern shades, and he's quite the thing, isn't he?
The average age is probably fairly high, but it is, a few more younger ones are coming in.
Good.
We've got one chap who's older than the boat.
Is it any good?
Yeah.
Good.
He is feeling his age a little bit now, but
Yeah,
you know,
well,
he's a good
aren't
chap.
we all? Yeah,
Yeah.
but he's that's wonderful.
No.
Well, it's a great success story, really, Mickey, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and it's super. And you get enough people on the boat. If you get 1 or 2 people who haven't done very much,
Yeah,
you know, they can learn on the boat. You can have somebody who's never sailed before
and that's okay, is it?
come along. Yeah, so long as there's enough people who do know what they're doing. But even then, you know, if you can follow instructions,
Yes,
you learn.
you do. Well, you're right in the groove there, Tom. You know, the French have a saying. I'm going to translate it because I don't know what your French is like, but here's how it goes. It says, if only the old could, if only the young knew. And there's a lot to be said about that, because us old fellas, you know, we know a thing or two, but there's a lot of things we cannot do. And every boat that ever sailed the sea needs young men on board. So it's great to see you on here. How do you come to be here?
So we're 3 generations of sailors. Grandparent, or my granddad, my dad and me. And so my granddad's been involved in this club for years. So yeah, I first started sailing on this boat 2012 with him and my dad, and I think it's fantastic fun.
It is, isn't it? I'm glad you see it that way. You're born to it, but what about somebody who's never been on a boat and sees this and sees you enjoying it, and how would it be for them if they came on board?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very easy boat to sail. I mean, you just come along, you do as much as you want to do or as little as you want to do, and have a bit of fun. Really.
Great. And what's in it for you?
Well, I mean, I like racing this boat. It's obviously a cruising club, but I like to push the boat and make it get faster.
But that's what she was born to do, isn't
Exactly.
it? Go
It was
fast.
built
Yeah.
as a racer, so there's something about a big, heavy wooden boat and making it go as fast as you can make it go.
This boat is built to the 100 square metre rule, which was a European rule in operation before World War II. The yachts were measured on sail area and various other refining measurements. The rule originated in Sweden, and the Swedes brought it in because they were fed up with the international rule, which is the rule that gave us the metre boats, the 8 metre, the 12 metre, the 6s and all the rest. They felt that they were a bit heavy for what they needed and they were expensive to build. So they came up with this square metre rule, and they produced boats they called skerry cruisers. And in the way of it, with racing yachts, it was a development class, and the Swedish boats became more and more extreme. They got expensive too, and they became really quite unseaworthy in the end, the ones that were running races. And the Germans arrived, and they thought, this is no good. Let's build some proper yachts, essentially to this rule, and they did. And so we have Overlord, a perfectly wholesome vessel that can sail the seas in absolute safety, fast and extraordinarily beautiful. They got it right. We really have got a bit of history here. It's not only the question of who owned her and who built her and this whole business with the Luftwaffe and the Windfall yachts. She's also a classic piece of yacht building history. And the way she's run by the club here, it fills me with delight. They're not trying to produce a perfect replica of anything. They're taking her to sea, which is where she still longs to be.